Video games as art has been one of the oldest debates within the industry. Hellblade, made by indie developer Ninja Theory out of Cambridge, England, has taken that debate and smashed it with their newest release, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
Hello. Who are you? Doesn't matter. Welcome. You are safe with me. I'll be right here, nice and close so I can speak without alerting the others. Let me tell you about Senua. Her story has already come to an end, but now it begins anew.
What's happening? It's breathing. Dead. It's breathing. It's breathing. He knows she's getting closer. He can feel her coming closer. She's getting closer. They're watching. They're watching. They're watching.
This is a journey deep into darkness. There will be no more stories after this one.
So what is this game? I know you might have heard of it, but you might not know really what it is. It's one part walking sim, one part adventure, one part puzzler, one part hack and slash, and it's all blends together to tell this amazing story about Senua, a woman during the medieval times who suffers from a mental health illness and has this slight psychosis, schizophrenic style disease in her brain, and she can't quite tell the difference between the manifestations in her brain and reality, and that's kind of where the conflict lies.
I wouldn't go back. No one will judge her. No one will ever know.
Now, Ninja Theory has regarded this title as an independent AAA title, meaning it's created by indie developers, but with a AAA production. And that's kind of how I'm going to review this game. I'm going to review it against other AAA titles, also against other indie titles. And my main question about this game is if Ninja Theory does a good job of blending both video game and art together. I really want to get to the heart of why this game was created and why it was created in the way that it was. So the first thing I want to talk about is the presentation. I want to start here because it's definitely a strong point in the game, and right when you open up the game, you're greeted with this very strong visual presence.
Enough light is all you need to see its suffocating power.
Senua is modeled after the actress Melina Juergens, I believe you pronounce her name. And at a graphical standpoint, they definitely did an amazing job modeling Melina, modeling her animations, and especially her facial animations. It just really comes to life, and it's some of the best I've ever seen.
You took him from me. I beg you, let him go. I'll give you what you want. I won't resist anymore. Just give him back.
Now, while I won't say the graphics are quite jaw-dropping, they're damn good. There are these vast, gorgeous vistas contrasted against these kind of dark and brooding dungeons, and the way that Norse mythology kind of works kind of clashes the two in a very interesting way, and I think that's part of the reason why they chose this time frame, is because it does clash against good and evil quite well. And Ninja Theory themselves does an amazing job at throwing you into the center of this Norse mythology, and the visuals as well as the sound design really complement that contrast.
Come and watch. And bring your sword.
You can't put it into words. That moment when you look into the eyes of the one who is supposed to reassure you, make you feel safe.
Now, I played on the original PS4, but I do wish that I have experienced it on the PS4 Pro, because there are some missteps, and I'll get into them a little bit later. Where the presentation really shines and where it really shows its magic is in the sound design. The use of the binaural microphone is very impressive and very innovative in the way that it portrays that mental health, that psychosis or schizophrenia where she hears these voices in her head, but they kind of whisper about your brain, and you feel as if it's tangible. Like you feel as if the voices are about the room when really they're in your head. It all comes together in a very unsettling, disturbing, but most of all, immersive way. They do a really great job of just really putting you into Senua's mental state.
You can't do this. Go back. Calm down. Don't just skate chance to
The darkness is coming. Yearns for life.
Now, getting back to those missteps, there are some missteps in the presentation, and it's quite unfortunate. It's quite disappointing because the game overall has a very beautiful and grand visual aesthetic to it, but there's these little things that kind of pop up here and there that really just make you think about why they missed those things, such as the corpse models, like the models of the corpses that are strewn throughout the world. They're very just bland. They look as if they just came out of a PS1 game. It's quite weird why they didn't take the extra time to maybe model them correctly, or instead of model them, maybe just make them more of like a set piece. And there's just also all these other textures that just are about the world that just don't have any, it doesn't have that HD quality to them. It's quite jarring when you look at them and you see like this beautiful high def, in some cases, I guess on the PS4 Pro, 4K visuals, but then just out of nowhere, a 16-bit looking texture, very drab and boring and lifeless, and it is jarring. And the same happens over on the sound design, and that is where, at least to me, maybe I'm picky, but the same does happen on the sound. The footsteps of Senua, they sound like they were recorded with a phone. They don't sound like they used the same kind of very high quality microphone that they used to capture the voices. And I'll play a little bit here.
You don't know where you're going.
The Rain also has that same issue where it sounds, it just sounds low quality. It doesn't have a very high quality, high fidelity to the sound. And when you pair that up with everything else that's going on that has that very high, pristine sound to it, it becomes jarring, and you're kind of just scratching your head wondering how they missed it. Something like the footsteps is more noticeable because it's constant, because there are areas where you only hear Senua, and you can hear those footsteps, and it just pulls you out of it just a little bit, and it's a shame. Maybe it's not game breaking, and I'm not sure if they meant to do that. Maybe it's a patch, maybe there's some type of rendering issue going on, but it does need to be addressed. And the last thing about presentation I want to talk about is Senua, or Melina's rather, performance. I don't think I've seen a better game actress. Melina Juergens does just a jaw-dropping job at portraying Senua.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This darkness takes everything. Everyone.
Senua, are you sure you want to do this? We can fight this together, side by side. We always do.
This is my battle. I have to face it alone, away from here.
Where will you go?
I don't know.
For how long?
I don't know.
The devotion that Melina has towards this role, and how well Ninja Theory translates that emotion and those passionate diatribes and that passionate delivery, and they translate it well into those beautiful character models and graphics, is stunning. It's some of the best that I've ever seen, and I guarantee you they are going to win some awards in that respect. It's just done so well. And the way that they collaborate this kind of real-time footage with the CGI or the real game time models, and it's just all done so very well. And if it wasn't for some of these little missteps, it would have been perfect. It would have been really amazing, but there are just I feel like they just didn't have enough time to focus on those extra little things that are out there. And with it being an indie developer, that's one of the downfalls. You have to really put your eggs in the right basket. And I think that they did here. I'm just pointing out and being picky here because for me, some of that stuff did pull me out of the experience. It's not much, it's not game breaking, but it does pull me a little bit out when you see a low res texture or you hear those low res footsteps and you hear that low res rain. And it just it's a little bit disappointing. But it's really that phenomenal performance by Melina that drives the story. And honestly, her role was so impressive and so memorable. I don't think it would feel right for her to play any other role. So I kind of feel bad for Melina in that sense because she is Senua. They did just such a perfect job of portraying her in a digital world. It's really something amazing. Moving on to gameplay, this is where I expect most to have issues with this game. It's not quite a walking sim, but it's also not quite a fully fledged game. It teeters on that line between the two, and unfortunately, I don't think that they should have done that. You can't really kick back and let the story kind of unfold like how most walking simulators are, but you also can't completely invest yourself in learning the gameplay mechanics and learning this game. It doesn't do both. It doesn't completely do both, and it kind of half-asses both. And unfortunately, I think it's to its detriment. Now, most of the game, you're walking around, you're learning about the world, you're learning about the story, you're solving these puzzles, and really you're just kind of unfolding the story. They allow you to unfold this story in a quite a linear way. It's just finding a door that you're blocked off from, looking at the images, and then trying to align certain objects in the game to make those images to open the door.
Look towards the gate, and the gate will open.
That's the only puzzle in this game, unfortunately, and there's a lot of them. Now, they are a bit of fun. These puzzles are pretty cool once you first start getting into them, and they do act as a buffer for the story, so it kind of stretches the game out a little bit longer. It stretches the experience out a little bit, and throughout there are some of these vocal diatribes that kind of progress the story, give you a little bit more of that immersion and make you understand Senua a little bit more. But when you get stuck for 20 minutes because you keep passing by this tiny section in this world that you didn't see before, and all you want to do is just hear this amazing story unravel, it does start to get annoying. And that's pretty much the word that I have for some of these puzzles. They're just annoying, and it's more so in the end. Once the story starts to really ramp up, and once you really start to get into finishing it and resolving this and trying to get the story going, you keep hitting these kind of boring and annoying puzzles. It would have been nice if they would have mixed it up and gave you different puzzles to do and different kind of ways to figure out certain objectives, but they don't, and it's all the same puzzle, unfortunately. Now, luckily, there is this fun combat. Ninja Theory did a great job of doing some of this combat, and it does break up the monotony of the puzzles and kind of the walking simulator aspect of this game. The combat includes a dodge, a parry, two types of attack, like a heavy attack, a light attack. It has a kick attack that you can use to kind of stun opponents, and it also has this focus attack, which slows down time, and you can build that focus attack while fighting good and parrying well, to use throughout the fighting. And one of the best parts of this game was learning how to fight. There's no tutorial or anything to teach you, so you have to learn actually how to fight. There was a while I didn't know that there was a focus attack, and I remember first finding out, oh wow, you can do this. You kind of have that self-accomplishment going on. And then you also find out there's other combos and there's different ways that you can attack, and you learn that. You learn that yourself by just kind of going crazy and setting shots up and trying to set up different combos against other enemies when there's like 2 or 3 around you. That's all great. It's really a good and refined combat system. And you're fighting enemies that aren't particularly too tough, and unfortunately there's not many variety. I would say maybe about 7 or 8 different enemies that you're going to be fighting.
Too fast. Finish this. Finish this.
But they all do have their own kind of fighting style, and they all have that. They all have a different approach that you need to take. Much like a Dark Souls, you kind of want to watch how they attack first before you go ahead and plan your combos and plan your attack. While it does help the story, it's more of just like a buffer. Again, like the puzzles, it kind of just stretches the game out maybe a little bit longer than it should be. And especially by the end of it, you kind of just want the story to unfold. You kind of just want this to be done. You kind of want a finale, and you don't really get that. And you know, that's my biggest criticism with the gameplay, because it balances both that walking simulator feeling but also a gameplay aspect, and they half-ass both of them. You're stuck in that limbo. You know, you're halfway invested in learning how to fight, and it's pretty easy. If they made the fighting difficult, maybe it would have more of that immersion, and I'll get to the permadeath thing a little bit later. But overall, the gameplay, if you're looking for gameplay, this is definitely not one that you're gonna wanna pick up, unfortunately. But let's talk about why I do recommend Hellblade. And that's the story and the impact of this experience. It's just so grand that it would be a shame for you to miss it. I don't wanna give any spoilers out, so I'm not going to get into much specifics. The story revolves around Senua, her pursuit of Helheim, which is hell. And she's trying to dispel this evil force, the darkness, that's destroyed everyone and everything around her, and also gain answers. Now, her mental health is the main kind of antagonist in the story, even if they lead you to believe otherwise.
Follows you before you have a chance to make sense of it. And darkness becomes a part of who you are.
It's the battle between her own thoughts that keeps the story moving and that keeps you interested into the story. Throughout the adventure, you're greeted by other figures like Senua's father and her lover Dillion, and you kind of learn more about them, and they kind of help lead you through this story as well. And there's also these runes that they call them lore stones that are strewn throughout the world, and you have to find them all.
Do not forget my stories, Senua, because your darkness comes from hell, and your fate lies there.
They're not necessarily just given to you. You do have to go out and look for them. Some are hidden. And they tell this second storyline, which honestly I'm not really too sure about. And I found myself skipping most of those audio logs. It's just, wasn't interested whatsoever in whatever story that those stones had to tell. Now, and I don't think it's because the story was boring or anything. I think it was just the fact that the main story was just so gripping and sad, and it just kept me on the edge of my seat, longing to hear the end. I wanted to hear this story unfold. I didn't care too much about whatever lore that they had going on. The lore wasn't directly related to Senua's experience. It was more of just the lore of the world, the lore of how the darkness came about. And yeah, but at the end of the game, I was left with a very strong bond towards Senua, and the final moments of the game are some of the most memorable. It's a very memorable experience. It's a game that has an impact to it. And if you are looking for something like that, if you are looking for an experience rather than an actual, game that you can get into and a game that kind of tests your skill, then this is a great experience to have.
Who are you?
It's just a memory.
Truth? Is that you?
Around you now.
For my tales of the Northmen, they call me Druth. A liar.
He's lost.
An old fool. Truth is my truth.
It's good to see you again. You kept your vow.
Guide you in this life and the next. I will tell you my stories of hell, if I may walk with you.
So the question remains, did Ninja Theory craft a good game? Or did they craft a good art piece? Or did they effectively blend the two together well? In my opinion, I couldn't help but wish that they incorporated this story and these characters in a much more fleshed out gameplay experience. I wanted something like a Witcher experience where you have this entirely vast, beautiful, luscious world full of all these quests, full of all these backstories, full of all this lore, character development, a loot system, just a fully fledged game with this amazing performance by Melina and these amazing characters and this amazing story about mental health and fighting your own thoughts. If they crafted a much bigger game, I think this would have been a immensely more popular and powerful experience. One of the crutches that they leaned on to sell that experience, to sell that gameplay, was the permadeath feature in the game. Death is basically you die too many times, the darkness consumes you, and all your progress is lost. You have to start from the beginning. And this was supposed to separate this from other walking simulators. It's supposed to immerse you more into the game, and it's supposed to keep you more immersed into what's going on. But unfortunately, it's just too easy. The game is too easy. You're not going to die that many times. And at least I didn't. I had no trouble completing it. I had no worries about permadeath at all. So in that sense, it felt more as a visual novel walking simulator than I think that they wanted to intend. But ultimately, it's Melina Juergen's performance that ties everything together and pushes that story along. So I ask, would this game have the same impact if she was replaced? You know, did the developers create a good enough experience on their own to tell this story, or did they just get lucky by having such a wonderful lead actress? And I think that's an important question to ask. I think that's where the distinction lies between a great gameplay experience or a great art piece. Does it blend the two together well? I definitely don't think so. I think that they should have just done one or the other. Make a walking sim or make a movie. You know, I just kept asking myself, can you have this as a movie? Would you have the same impact if this was a movie or a visual novel? Do you have to have it in this gameplay? Does it have to rely on these puzzles that got boring and they got in your way? Sure, the combat was kind of fun, but do they serve the purpose of the story? No, they absolutely do not. It's the performance of Melina and the story around her. The biannual stuff is pretty cool. It gets a little gimmicky at the end. But it is a good experience, and it is an experience I suggest that you try to have. So I think if you were looking for a game, then you're going to be disappointed in Hellblade. But if you're looking for an interesting experience, if you're looking for a strong, impactful story, and you have a good weekend to waste, took me about 6 hours to beat, then you'll leave feeling the same way that I did, which is impressed, grateful, but also full of what ifs. With that being said, I have to give this game a 3.75 out of 5. I hope you guys enjoyed this review of Hellblade's Senua Sacrifice by Ninja Theory Games. I expect to see more reviews like this. Don't forget to follow us over at Twitter @NoLivesGaming and our Twitch, twitch.tv/no_lives. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.
Can you see it?
The land of mist and fog.
He's in there.
The old fool was right.
Is he?
What was it he said? The river of knives across which lies the halls of hell. The place they call Helheim.